Todd Monken stood in front of reporters today and confirmed what a lot of us genuinely did not want to hear. Deshaun Watson is going to start the regular season opener against Jacksonville. I've been covering this quarterback competition closely enough to have real expectations about how it might shake out. And I'll be honest with you, this is not the outcome I expected walking into today. I want to be clear about something before I get into the actual breakdown here. This isn't a reaction built off one headline or one soundbite pulled out of context. I sat through the entire press conference, I watched today's practice tape in full, and I've been tracking this competition daily for weeks now. What I'm about to walk you through is the complete picture, not a snapshot chosen to fit a predetermined conclusion. Let's start with exactly what Monken said, because I think the reasoning matters as much as the decision itself. He explained that the staff took in the full body of work, everything from the off-season program through training camp, through the joint practices, through the actual preseason games, and ultimately felt that starting the season on the road, Watson gave this team the best chance to move the football and put points on the board. He said that was really the entire basis for the call. Move the ball, score points, that's the job. He admitted he'd been leaning that direction going into the final preseason game, but wasn't fully certain yet. And after the staff regrouped and looked at everything one more time together, they landed on Watson. I think it's worth sitting with that specific phrase, best chance to move the ball and score points, because it's the kind of justification that sounds reasonable on its surface, but doesn't hold up well once you actually compare it against the statistical record from this camp. If moving the football and scoring points were genuinely the deciding factor, the tape and the tracker both would have needed to support that conclusion clearly. Instead, across nearly every preseason measure we've tracked this camp, completion percentage, turnover rate, yards per attempt in meaningful situations, Sanders has been the more efficient, more productive quarterback more often than not. That's not a knock on Monken's honesty. I believe he genuinely believes what he said. I just don't think the tape fully backs it up. He was also asked directly whether this is a week-to-week arrangement, something that could flip quickly if Watson struggles early. His answer was firm. No, they're not treating this as a week-to-week decision. He made a point of praising how far Sanders has come and said the organization is genuinely excited about his future, but reiterated that this specific call isn't designed to be revisited on a short leash. That's a meaningful detail on its own, and I want to make sure it doesn't get lost. This isn't being framed internally as a probationary start for Watson. One bad half against Jacksonville, and the door swings back open. The language coming from the head coach suggests a real commitment to riding this decision out for a genuine stretch of the season, regardless of how the opening weeks actually go. That raises the stakes considerably for how the next several weeks of football actually play out, because it means the leash here is longer than a lot of fans were probably hoping for walking into today. When asked whether this was a difficult decision to actually make between the two of them, Monken didn't dodge that either. He said absolutely, that any decision this close is genuinely hard, that both quarterbacks have competed at a high level throughout this process. He compared it to other roster decisions that are much more straightforward, saying deciding who starts at defensive end isn't a hard call most of the time. But this one, given how competitive both quarterbacks have been, genuinely was. He framed it simply as part of the job, trying to put the players on the field who give this team the best chance to actually move the ball and score. I'm going to be honest about my own reaction here, because I don't think there's any point pretending otherwise. I did not see this coming, not after the tape we've all watched together throughout this entire camp, and what made it sting even more was something else Monken said afterward, that the organization knows what it sees every single day inside that building, inside their own walls, watching their own players and their own momentum, and that the staff is fully behind Watson moving forward. He went a step further and suggested that people on the outside simply aren't seeing the film the way the organization sees it internally. I want to push back on that directly, because we've been breaking down the film on this channel every single day throughout this entire camp, including the coach's all-22 angle whenever it's been available. That wasn't an accident. I made that investment specifically because I wanted to be fully prepared in case a moment like this one ever actually happened. And based on everything I've watched with my own eyes, today especially, I have real questions about that specific explanation. Because here's the thing about day 21 specifically. Watson didn't have a good day. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. There were checkdowns that never threatened a defense vertically, throws that drifted toward the sideline without much conviction behind them, stretches where the offense simply never found any real rhythm with him running it. Meanwhile, on the same practice field, Sanders looked like the same quarterback he's looked like for weeks now, connecting on a touchdown to Cade Corley, another touchdown throw to Gage Larvadian, and a genuinely impressive scramble play where he rolled outside the pocket to his right and still delivered an accurate ball to Larvadian for another score. That's not one flash play. That's a full body of consistent, high-level work on the exact same day his direct competition struggled to find any real footing. I want to walk through those specific throws a little more, because I don't think a simple mention of 2 touchdowns fully captures what actually happened on that field. The touchdown to Corley came off a clean read against real coverage, not a scripted look designed to make a young quarterback look good. The connection with Larvadian in the pocket showed the same anticipation and timing that's defined his best throws all camp. And the scramble touchdown, rolling right outside a collapsing pocket and still finding an accurate target downfield, is exactly the kind of off-schedule production that shows up in winning football games when the original play design breaks down. None of that is manufactured. That's a quarterback operating at a genuinely high level on the exact same day his competition couldn't find any rhythm at all. I don't think anyone should expect this to slow Sanders down, for what it's worth. He's gone from 4th on this depth chart a year ago to 1st for a while during this camp, and now sits 1 spot away from QB1 heading into the regular season. Based on how this entire competition has unfolded, I genuinely believe he's going to end up playing meaningful snaps sooner than a lot of people currently expect. But I won't pretend I'm not frustrated by having to go through another extended waiting period. This feels like unnecessary delay tacked onto a young quarterback's development. Time that could otherwise be spent building real continuity with the first-team offense. He's shown a genuine desire to become one of the better quarterbacks in this league, and having to wait through another stretch like this one leaves a real sour taste, especially paired with a public explanation that suggests outside observers simply aren't watching closely enough. We've been watching closely. We've been watching every single day. There's a real cost to this kind of delay too, beyond just the emotional frustration of it. Every rep Sanders takes with the second-team offense instead of the starters is a rep he isn't spending building actual chemistry with the players, who will be around him if and when he does eventually get the call. Timing with your top receivers, protection communication with your starting offensive line, all of that takes real reps to develop, and none of it transfers cleanly from scout team work. If this organization genuinely believes in his long-term future the way Monken keeps saying they do, every extra week spent on the bench instead of building that continuity is a week that potentially costs this team down the road, whether that's later this season or further into the future. Practice wrapped with the Browns working in shells, and the setup going forward is clear. Watson is taking every single snap with the starting offense now that he's officially been named the guy, while Sanders is picking up the remaining scout reps behind him. Monken talked about using these final couple weeks of camp to keep getting Sanders real work before the team shifts fully into regular season mode, and Watson takes over the entirety of actual game week preparation. Worth noting directly, Sanders is not expected to play at all in the final preseason matchup against New England. That final detail deserves its own moment of consideration too. Not playing at all in the last tune-up game means Sanders effectively closes out this entire preseason evaluation window on the note we just watched, a genuinely strong performance on day 21, while Watson gets an additional live opportunity in front of the coaching staff without any direct side-by-side comparison happening on the same field. From a pure evaluation standpoint, that's an interesting choice, whether intentional or simply a product of Watson needing the reps more heading into a real opener. I want to bring in some outside reaction here too, because I wasn't the only person surprised by how this got explained publicly. Analysts Emery Hunt and Garrett Bush both weighed in on this decision, and I think their framing captured something important that's worth repeating. Hunt compared the situation to sitting down at a genuinely high-end restaurant, waiting on a meal you've built up real expectations for, taking a few underwhelming bites, and finishing the plate anyway, simply because you already paid for it. That's essentially how he described this decision playing out with Watson. His broader point was that if you actually watch the film, both preseason games included, there's no honest argument that Watson outplayed Sanders on the actual field this camp, which led him to a pretty direct conclusion that this decision reads far more like it's rooted in the financial commitment already made to Watson than in what's actually shown up on tape. I think that restaurant comparison lands because it captures something specific about sunk cost thinking. That's easy to recognize in everyday life, but harder to spot when it's happening inside a professional football organization. Nobody wants to admit a major financial commitment isn't working out the way it was supposed to. Especially not publicly, especially not this early into that commitment. It's a lot more comfortable to keep going back to the same investment and hope it eventually pays off the way it was originally projected to. Whether that's actually what's happening here is something only the people inside that building truly know for certain. But the pattern Hunt is describing is a familiar one across professional sports. And it's exactly the kind of dynamic that makes fans deeply skeptical of decisions like this one. Hunt also brought up Watson's own public comments from over the weekend, saying it felt like the first time we'd really heard a raw, unfiltered reaction from him about everything that's been directed his way from fans and outside voices. His read was that hearing Watson vent that openly gave him a real hint that Watson likely already had some assurance internally that the starting job was heading his way regardless of how camp actually played out on the field. Garrett Bush added that he'd sensed something shifting in how the staff was setting up practice reps even before this announcement became official, and admitted his initial instinct, once Watson kept trotting back out for extended work, was concern, not relief. His honest assessment matched Hunt's. At no point in this entire competition does he believe Watson genuinely outplayed Sanders, even during stretches when Watson was working exclusively with the first-team offense. There's also been real national pushback on this decision, beyond just our corner of Brown's coverage. Stephen A. Smith weighed in with characteristically blunt criticism of how poorly Watson has actually looked this camp, and he wasn't alone in that assessment. Multiple national voices have echoed similar concerns, questioning openly why a team would hand a starting job back to a quarterback who, by most independent accounts watching the same practices and the same preseason snaps we've all seen, simply hasn't performed at a level that justifies the decision on football merit alone. I think it's worth pointing out how rare it actually is for national media. People who don't cover this team on a daily basis and don't have the same emotional stake in this roster that a dedicated fan base does, to land on nearly the exact same read as the people who've been in the building every single day of camp. Usually you get some divergence there, some benefit of the doubt extended from outsiders who haven't watched every single practice rep. That gap basically didn't exist here. National voices and daily beat coverage arrived at strikingly similar conclusions, almost independently of each other. And that kind of convergence usually means something real is actually happening on the field. Not just a narrative some of us have talked ourselves into. I'll be straightforward about where that leaves me heading into the regular season. I'm frustrated by the process here, and I don't think that frustration is unreasonable given everything we've documented on tape throughout this entire camp. But I also know this is far from the final chapter of this story. Sanders has earned real trust from this coaching staff, even without the title attached to his name right now. And I don't believe that trust simply evaporates because of one roster announcement in late August. Regardless of where he sits on this depth chart heading into Week 1, second string or otherwise, I'm going to keep covering him the exact same way I always have. And I know this fan base is going to keep showing up for him too. This decision doesn't sit right with a lot of us, and I don't think it should. But the story here is nowhere close to finished. I'd also gently push back on framing this purely as a loss for Sanders, because I don't think that's the full picture either. Every quarterback who's eventually gone on to a long, successful career in this league has had to sit through a stretch that felt unfair in the moment. What actually separates the ones who make it through that stretch from the ones who don't isn't the waiting itself, it's how they handle it. Based on everything we've seen from Sanders this entire camp, The poise, the consistency, the way he's answered every single question this coaching staff has put in front of him. I have real confidence he handles this exact situation the right way too.